Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for Perfecting Your Elevator Pitch with our special guest, Women in Wine London. As many of you know, we are headed to London this June, tomorrow is June, on the 28th for our international summit. So we were excited to reach out and work with Women in Wine London to provide this exciting networking live webinar. Joining us is the leadership team, Regine Lee, Sula Richardson, and Hannah Van Susteren. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. We're excited to be here with you. I know there's a few people joining on today that are attending the summit, so this is a great opportunity to get ready for it in any of our networking events. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Is that good for me to go?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, well, welcome everybody. Good morning, shall we say. It's the end of day here in London, but obviously it's 10 a.m. there, so good morning. As Kendall said, my name is Sula Richardson, and I'm one of the leadership team of Women in Wine London, based in the UK. And I'm here with the other leadership team, Hannah and Regine. And before we jump straight into the elevator pitch session, we wanted to do a short introduction about who we are, how we came to be, and how we came to come up with the elevator pitch session. So just before we start, just to check that everyone can hear us as well, is there anybody out? Do you want to tell us where you're from, where you're tuning in from? And we can just make sure that you hear us if you want to type in the Q&A box. Is there anybody there?
Oh, we can continue on.
We can continue.
Yeah,
so we'll get going.
hello.
Hi, Deborah. There we go. Deborah Brenner, everybody. She's here from New York. Wonderful. Hi. Hi, Serena, and Angela, and Randy, and Michelle. Hello. Hi, everyone. Okay, so about Women in Wine London. We formed in 2015. And Regine and I were sat in a wine bar on the River Thames in central London, and we were discussing our options and feeling a bit frustrated about not having a wider network to talk to about an issue that we were having, and to seek advice from industry peers about something. And that was really the time that Women in Wine London formed. We set out to provide women in London, the London wine industry, with a strong industry network, and positively impacted their professional development through a program of events and socials, and really try to create opportunities for people to meet and collaborate with each other, because that really wasn't happening, and it was something that we felt was really needed. As a group, we're kind of at the very early stages of development compared to Women of the Vine and Spirits. But over the last 2 years, we've become a group of over 400 women, representing 60 companies in the trade, which is amazing. And over such a short period of growth, which we feel shows that people are really into it, and they, want to really meet other people in the industry. So we're absolutely thrilled with the support that we've received. The group is a real mixture of people as well, from all seniority levels and professions, from wine buyers to communications people, masters of wine, masters sommeliers, educators, winemakers. It's a real mix, and I think that is really valuable. And on the screen you might see some pictures from recent activity we've done. We recently hosted a panel discussion at one of our large trade shows, where we discussed diversifying thought leadership in the wine industry. We do workshops, speed networking sessions, which are quite fun, and we do a lot of panel discussions which are themed and topical. We recently did the fine wine market, and we've done buying, communications, yeah, just to name a few really. It's been really interesting, and it gives us an opportunity to bring in industry leaders to talk to the group. We're also, as a leadership team, trying to lobby the wider trade to have discussions about the stuff that really affects everyone, not just women. And I'm sure you can all really appreciate that. And I'm just going to check in. Okay. Yeah, so before we move on directly into the panel, into the pitch discussion, we just wanted to cover off some things about the trade that might be really useful to get an idea about where we are. The UK wine trade itself is very established in London City, and it's a real historical hub of wine and spirits trading. A lot of industry bodies were founded here. The Institute of Masters of Wine was founded here. The Wine and Spirit Education Trust was founded here. Court of Masters Sommeliers. So it's got a long history of wine trade activity. And because we love a good statistic, we wanted to give you a bit of background about the UK industry and wanted to highlight that women represent 43% of jobs in the industry here. And that's in retail, hospitality, and manufacturing of wine and spirits. However, as you can see on the right, that women only have 35% of jobs in the top pay quartile. And this was something we wanted to bring to light early on because it's a current issue and quite a big topic of discussion here at the moment. The UK government recently made employers with 250 or more employees publicly publish their salary figures, comparing men and women's salaries and average pay across their organisation. It was quite interesting reading for everyone. And this has been pretty groundbreaking because it's opened up a lot of discussion and debate about the future of our industry and the level of transparency that there is, or lack of, perhaps. And the raw data for this, if anybody's interested, can be found on the UK government website, and it's completely open for anybody to read, which is incredible. And just finally, before we move on, I just wanted to also show you some figures on sales in the UK. So women contribute, we moved too fast. Women contribute 9.5 billion pounds in wine sales revenue, with women making up 55% of wine consumers in a 17.3 billion pound industry, which is pretty good. And women have 70 to 80% of purchasing power, according to a recent Forbes study. So hopefully overall these stats will give you an idea about the market here and the industry that us three work in. And so with all that in mind, how did we get to the elevator pitch session? How did we get here? Well, like any other industry, it's often hard to meet people. And hard to meet people working in your industry. Meet like minds and find a community where you can discuss personal and industry developments at the same time. London has a lot of wine tastings, a lot of trade shows, and the UK wine industry, wine and spirits industry is booming. So there should be a lot of people to talk to, right? It should be absolutely, jam-packed with people. And we work in alcohol, so surely it's easy to just have a few drinks with someone and chat about things, right? That's the presumption, but we all know that in a professional sense, that's not the case, and it's not that straightforward. So as a three, we started to discuss, okay, so hypothetically, what happens if we were put in front of a contact or someone that we really wanted to talk to, and we finally had that opportunity to be in front of that key contact? What would we say? And we all stumbled. And you know, we all stared at each other with blank faces and went, I don't know. And this is how this session came about, because we thought we need a challenge, and we need to start talking about ourselves in a really positive way, in a professional sense. So I'm going to hand you over to Regine and Hannah, who are going to take on the rest of the session.
Great, thanks, Sula. Yeah, thanks for the intro. So yeah, as Sula said, we were really interested in this kind of topic of how you introduce yourself, because we all do it all the time, but we never really think about what's coming out of our mouths when we say things. And actually, as people know, like, first impressions really matter, especially when you're meeting someone for the first time and need to make a really good first intro very quickly. So that's how we developed this session. So we're going to go through very briefly what's an elevator pitch. We're going to give some examples of elevator pitches and give you some tips to think about. And some of this might be common sense for sure, but actually it's not so common sense when you haven't ever thought of it before. And so this is why we're kind of bringing it up to the fore and really helping people think about how they describe themselves. Great, so what is an elevator pitch? Well, very briefly, it's a concise, carefully planned, and well-practiced marketing message about your professional self. So it should contain a hook or a theme and go no longer than 20 seconds, because any longer than that and you're going to start losing people and they're going to start really phasing what you're saying out of their brains. So yeah, very quick, very precise, and really, you know, it's an opportunity to describe what you do in a really compelling way. Right. Okay, so we've got an example of our first elevator pitch.
Yeah, so I think so often elevator pitches come across, or even just a meet and greet, as a name, a job title, a company, and you do lose that hook that Regine mentioned earlier. And at the end of the day, we really are trying to tell a story. And so we've developed Amy, who is our on-trade sales manager at Windsor Sparkling Wines. And if we were Amy and going into an elevator pitch, so to speak, a networking event or a fine wine tasting, whatever it may be, an example of a poor elevator pitch would be something along the lines of, I work on the sales team at Windsor Wines. We are an English sparkling winery that produces premium sparkling wine. I am responsible for managing our on-trade UK restaurants. I have been in this role for 3 years and hold my WSET diploma. Regine, do you want to comment on what's missing from that?
Right. So thanks, Amy, for your lovely introduction. So a couple things. Like, one is, you know, why is this not really compelling? Yes, this is an example that we created, but what's missing from it? Why did we not really tune in or find that particular description of Amy that interesting? Let's see if you can hear it. Well, first thing you should consider is, yes, you should describe your profession, but your profession is not necessarily your job title. Your job title doesn't really describe what you do in a way that someone's really going to understand. For example, I'm the head of customer business support, and I don't think anyone just listening to that would ever really understand what I do. Sula, your alumni engagement.
I mean, my title is engagement manager. That is very heavy marketing speak, and most people have no idea what that is. So I've had to really change the way that I talk about it.
Exactly. So, like, you know, you do need to describe your job, but you have to say it in a way that actually makes sense to someone and not just leave it as whatever your job title is. And that kind of leads to our second bullet point, which is your expertise and competency. So Amy's first speech just said she's an on-trade account manager for an English wine sparkling producer. Great. So what? You know, there's like, I don't know, a million of them now here in England as we try to boost the market for English sparkling wine. But it didn't really say anything that set her apart, and what really she did for either her company, her role, or the industry generally. Types of businesses, so I think, think through who you're speaking to and also what kind of business you're describing. English wine sparkling producer, yeah, that's pretty descriptive, so that was pretty good. But you could bring a little bit more detail about what kind of producer it is. Oh, we make champagne style sparkling wine. We target the premium end. We're really competing with some Grand Marque champagnes, for example. So it kind of provides context that puts your role into perspective for other people. And then the last thing to consider is, maybe some special strengths that you have that, again, set you apart from others, but also, something that you uniquely contributed to your company or your role. All right, so let's try it again, Amy.
Before trying again with Amy, I want to just look back briefly on an event that we held here in London. We called it the Not Your Networking event. And it was an opportunity for around 40 women from the wine trade, members of Women in Wine, to come together and do a round robin practice session on their elevator pitch. We came up with different questions to ask. We asked our peers to spend 30 seconds describing what they did, have other members of the trade push them to improve on that. And I have to say, I think for me, it was an incredible opportunity to really reflect on what I did, how I valued myself as an employee and also as a member of the fine wine trade. So I do encourage you, if there is ever an opportunity to really work with some peers or even people not within your profession, perhaps, to talk through this and to get to the core of what makes you you in your industry is very, very, very useful. So if we were Amy and we were trying again on the back of Regine's comments, we would come across with something like this. I am the on-trade sales manager at Windsor Wines, one of the UK's top premium sparkling wineries. I'm responsible for selling our wines to fine dining restaurants across the UK. Since I took the role 3 years ago, I have doubled the number of restaurants we work with. This year, I have run 2 exciting projects in which I have surpassed targets of placing our rosé on wine lists across London and increasing brand awareness in northern cities through a series of tastings. This is my second role in the wine industry, having previously worked as a manager of a wine shop. I hold a WSET diploma and continue to further my professional development and interests as a member of Women in Wine London.
Yeah, plug for us. Thanks, Amy.
Couldn't help it.
So yeah, I mean, I think that provides so much more richness and depth into what Amy does, and it actually sets her apart so much more than her first elevator pitch. So another thing to keep in mind is how to tailor to an audience. Obviously, we put the script together and that example together, and in conversation, it'll be a lot more casual, maybe a little bit more free-flowing and back and forth. But I think it's still really important to think about who you're speaking to first. Who are you looking in the eye and wanting to get some information about you? So, for example, a potential new boss, a potential producer and partner, a potential customer, a potential employee, or another useful industry contact. And it's really important to kind of tailor what you say depending on that audience.
I agree. I think otherwise it comes across as being almost dishonest, doesn't it? If you can't, as much as we use the elevator pitch as a catch-all or a, kind of a, some sort of, magic potion for a situation. If we don't tailor that, you don't know what your aim is, and you don't know what you or the other individual are really going to get out of that meeting. So we've taken, we're back to Amy again, and we've come up with 3 different situations for Amy in which she might tag on a couple of sentences or questions to that elevator pitch. So if you were speaking, for example, to a new boss, a potential new boss, let's say, the real value here is, why would you be interested in working in their company, and what skills would you bring? So Amy perhaps might say something along the lines of, I'm curious to hear how you managed your growth over the past year and would love to speak with you more about that. In my current role, I know how challenging it is to compete for slots on wine lists in the sparkling wine category, especially against the Grand Marque. I developed new ways to better approach how we sell English sparkling wine to sommeliers and restaurant buyers, and would love to speak with you in greater detail about how I could do the same at your company, having surpassed targets in my current role. That draws on her experience, and also I think really shows what sort of benefit she could be to another company. If we go on to a potential new employee, for example, if you're pitching for someone to join you in your team, the question would you be really looking to answer is, what is the benefit of working for you, and what would they bring? So Amy might say something along the lines of, English sparkling wine and our company are growing in some really exciting ways, and we are looking for someone with your knowledge and experience in the northern UK market to increase brand awareness in consumers and in trade. I think it's hard not to get excited about that. You as a potential employee really see the value that you would bring to this company. And then the last one we went with was a customer. And there we're answering a pretty simple question, which is, what is the USP of the product? My experience in working with restaurants around the UK has shown that English sparkling rosé is a growing trend, and placing this on your wine list shows your consumers that you are ahead of the curve. You'll also be able to make better margins and inspire your customers to trade up from your house sparkling wine. I feel sold.
Yeah. So it's kind of like providing the extra detail depending on who you're speaking to, right? So like, what would someone really be interested if they were talking to you? And I think in a lot of networking situations, that is the case. People are talking to other people for the express purpose of meeting new contacts for professional reasons. And so to give people the hook to want to speak to you and engage in what you do and who you are, that's really important. And it's important to understand what they would like from you as well. So to keep things in mind while you're talking to a potential new contact, one is definitely the language. Firstly, like the use of jargon. I think we're so used to talking about certain things in our own companies, certain things like, you know, acronyms like APP if you're talking about the WSET, which means approved program provider, a course provider. You know, just those words just kind of flow out subconsciously. But of course, no one outside the WSET really uses that term at all. Or even, you know, your own job title can be really obscure and really specific to your company, which is why, again, we do emphasize that you don't just say what your title is, but actually describe what you do in your job. The tone of voice that you have, so, you know, obviously depending on who it is, whether it's formal or informal, but, you know, keep a positive tone of voice, and I'm sure everyone realizes that, and that's not something to remind people of, but, you know, the energy that you bring to a conversation is really kind of catching, and people will feel the same energy that you bring to the conversation. And also body language. Again, I think, you know, there's a really cool TED talk about body language and how that kind of gives you confidence or gives other people confidence in you, but I think it's still really important. You know, clearly, like the most classic one is if you just cross your arms and look defensive, or lean back and, you know, just look really nervous, then I think that really kind of translates to your own message. So have confidence in yourself and what you do, and you know yourself the best, so you should be able to speak confidently about what you do.
Yeah. So to follow up after you've done your pitch, you've gone in there, you've been really confident, you've done the body language, you've got everything on there. How can you follow up so that person remembers you? And often that's simply just asking a question. You know, so often we kind of talk at someone, a bit like we're doing today, but it's how to bring that person into the conversation so that they remember you and they remember that conversation. And if you don't know what they do, ask them. If you have something in common, ask what they're currently working on, and try to create a dialogue so that they'll remember. And also the business card, which is you know, has a long history within the trade. But be mindful of etiquette with business cards. If someone gives you a business card, look at it in front of them. So many times people throw it into a bag or they put it into their back pocket. And you know, make sure that you've looked at the business card, not only because it's polite and it's respectful that they've given you that business card, but also, do you have the correct information to be able to contact that person on the business card? So many now are like cool, trendy things that just have images on and like a hashtag. You can't follow up with that. So, you know, make sure you check.
I have to interject and say I once received a business card in a handshake.
Oh, there you go.
And I think that might have been the fastest I've ever thrown out a business card. It was pretty brutal. And totally irrelevant too.
Yeah. And be mindful of where you are in that, you know, in that regard as well. In China, you know, it's seen as quite a social faux pas if you don't accept the business card with two hands and thank that person. It's a sign of respect and respect for what they do and their business and their company. But on the flip side, a business card might not be the most appropriate way to approach it either. I work in marketing, as many of you do as well, I'm sure. And instead of getting business cards and trading business cards, I often ask people, you know, what's your Instagram, what's your Twitter handles? Because that would be a way that we would interact within marketing and PR. And building up a social engagement with someone can often lead to a really valuable online and offline relationship. So we go on to the next steps in practicing your elevator pitch. And it's, you know, we all have such busy lives and busy diaries, and often things come up that you go to and you arrive and it's this incredible networking opportunity, but you're kind of out of practice. So practicing it is really key, and that can be in small groups. That can be, you know, Hannah talked about the session that we did in London. It was so valuable to do for all three of us and the rest of the group. My first pitch was awful and I was so embarrassed and just couldn't do it. But after we'd all moved through the groups and everyone had done it a few times, it was quite empowering actually.
Absolutely.
And you felt, okay, I know what I'm doing, and if I have to do this now with a lot of people, I've got this, I've got the time.
Yeah. I think empowering is a great word to use there. I feel like by the energy in the room by the time we left was just full of confidence and support and just energy that wasn't necessarily, you know, not that it wasn't there at the start, but in a way that really really came together for the evening.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes into one thing we've noticed, which is that a lot of women lack confidence, especially when they talk about themselves or push for things for themselves. And actually, having done the speed networking and practicing your elevator pitch session, what we found is a lot of women in the small groups that they were discussing their elevator pitches in really supported each other and said, hey, why are you not highlighting this amazing thing that you do?
Absolutely.
Hey, you're a lot more senior than you actually said or it sounded like you were saying. Just, you know, say this instead and really highlight the amazing things that you do. And I think the light bulb moment came on for a lot of us, which was that, you know, we shouldn't be shy about this because it's not going to sound like bragging to the rest of the world, to be honest, you know, like, especially with the right tone, which I'm sure everyone knows and intuitively has. It's not like it should be anything you should be shy about talking about. And it really took some, like, practice and putting yourself out there just initially to get that feedback from people.
Exactly. And often, you know, this could be, it could be with your close friend or your partner or something, but also in my company, we've started to almost practice it in groups when we're going to events and we're going to trade shows. So on the way there on the tube, it's like, okay, what are you going to say? What are you doing? tell me a top line about this project that you need to discuss. And it's good to practice. One of the points on the screen that you'll see at the moment is I put LinkedIn profile. This is a bit of a clincher. You know, like, are you up to date? If someone's going to follow up after you've met them, you've done your elevator pitch, you've connected, and they're going to be able to find you online, is your photo up to date? Will they recognize you? You know, when was the last time you Googled yourself? Like, how often do we do that? Not very often. What will they find when they put your name in? Is your photo, you know, what photos are up there? I'm sure a lot of you, you know, have thought of these things, but I think it's all tied into the same messaging. Yeah, would you have anything to add to that?
I had a photo up until recently, I'm embarrassed to say, on LinkedIn that was taken in 2011. And I had fringe down to here and hair up to here. And I would go into client meetings, and occasionally someone would say, I didn't know I was meeting you. I didn't recognize you from your photo. And it's amazing to feel like you are putting your, the best foot forward on LinkedIn. I think that's huge. And in terms of getting your CV, looked at and that sort of thing, definitely people in your industry can be incredibly valuable, but also I don't want to suggest that friends or partners can't be incredibly useful. They hear you talking about your work all the time, and they're the ones who are really going to promote you in a good and positive way. So I suggest that. And lastly, making sure that you're getting feedback in a good setting. There's nothing worse than getting feedback that, one, doesn't help you, and two, you don't know how to give. I think it's very easy to forget how important it is to practice giving feedback. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these sort of things.
Yeah. And just that the other point on the previous slide is about looking at your own resume or CV for tips about what you've done, because actually, you've already done that. You've already sold yourself in a lot of ways on that document, on your resume. So why not use some of the bullet points in your resume to highlight what you've done? And it's weird, like we tend to forget what we do. Like sometimes you look at your own resume and looked at, you're like, oh, is that what I did in my last job? Oh yeah. It's like, but yeah, that's right, I did do that. But yeah, use whatever you have already to think about some things to highlight about yourself.
I just want to pick up on something that Deborah's put in on here is people that introducing somebody that works in a vineyard. No, they're the winemaker. Like, that's a huge difference that you would describe yourself as. And I think we often do that, and it's such a shame that we don't have the confidence sometimes. But hopefully, we're getting through that barrier.
Yeah, it's like you're not just working in a winery; you are the head winemaker. Like, say that, own it. It's fine. Everyone will appreciate that. So.
And does anybody have any questions that they would like to put to us? That was a long session, but we're here for a bit longer. If anybody wants to ask us anything, or would like us to go back through anything that we've done
about the elevator pitch or the UK markets or Women in Wine London, anything.
I think, Sula, I really liked your point about networking goals and establishing those in the early stages of a meeting. Going together with a team. I can envisage you on the tube, sort of talking through your points. And it does, I think it often can become a little, automatic that we go into wine tastings or events, and how do we, keep that, how do we keep it new and keep it fresh? And if you can do that, I think we get back to that point of honesty that we were speaking about earlier, which is so useful.
Yeah.
I see Diana has a question here. If you guys could each share your own elevator pitch, I'd love to hear some more examples. And a question too is, sometimes you can't really have the time that you want to express what you want to say. Do you have tips for shortening it, maybe even more?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a good point. Like, you could have short versions and long versions. One example that I had was, again, my title is a bit weird. So I work at Liberty Wines as head of customer business support. And sometimes if you go into a networking event, you'll say that. You'll just say, hi, my name is Regine. Yeah, great. I work at Liberty and I'm the head of customer business support. You just leave it at that. But actually, the better elevator pitch that's just a little bit longer, which is more descriptive, would be, hi, I work at Liberty Wines. We're a premium wine importer and distributor based in the UK. We have an amazing portfolio of premium Italian wines in particular. And my role there is to lead a team of 9 people doing a whole host of value-added services for our customers, from marketing to sales support and analytics, and to wine education and graphic design materials. So it's really exciting. We have a lot of great customers that we work with, and we have some amazing projects to help sell our wines to the end consumer in restaurants and in wine shops. So, you know, just hopefully not too long, not too boring or too long-winded, but just something that gives a little bit of flavor for what you do.
And language that can really help. So my company, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, is global. So often just words like that can really lift something really short. So I'll say, my name is Sula, I'm an engagement manager for WSET. I work on a global marketing team. And that word then implies a lot of things, that we work in multiple languages, that we work in different media markets, that we have to be online all the time because what's happening in the US is happening on a different time zone to what's happening in Asia. So if you can pick out things that would signify other aspects of your job really quickly, like the word global or director, or something like that, I think that's a good way of shortening things as well. And would that be, I'm trying to think of other examples of the global, but
descriptive words, like you don't have to throw like loads of metrics, like, oh, we are a 50 million pound revenue company, blah blah blah. But you just shut off. They're like, okay, you're just reading that from a newsreader. But it's kind of like, I work for a large importer distributor that's nationwide, so it kind of gives you a sense of the scale of the job and the company I work for. Or like, I work for a premium wine importer, or I work for a wine importer that deals with national restaurant chains or national multiple retailers, something that gives a bit of the scale of what you do.
Yeah, I agree. I think often we launch right into our own position within a company and sometimes forget that perhaps someone else doesn't know your company. Maybe they haven't heard of you before. Maybe they have you confused with someone else. I think getting that kind of context is so powerful for the rest of that discussion.
Yeah, and I think
it paints the holistic picture too, giving a little bit about your company. I think one of the best things I took away from this is not just giving your title. That is just huge, because we meet so many people, and there's a lot of directors, national directors, on-premise directors, and you mix in. But if you actually explain a little bit about what you do and paint a picture for the person you're talking to, that really helps make a connection.
Yeah, and I think also one thing to keep in mind for the people coming to London and for the summit is that job title naming conventions are very different. So EVP in the UK market it's senior obviously, but it doesn't really provide the context as much. That's not a term that a lot of UK companies use at all, in fact. So actually providing that context of what you do and maybe the seniority or something about your job actually helps. And as Hannah said about the context of your company, because here in the UK we all know what our companies are, we understand who our competitors are, we're customers and sellers of wine. So if someone says, I work for Bibendum, I work for Atlas, I work for Liberty, everyone knows. But if you're going into a new market, you really do need to provide the context of your company. Otherwise, people don't really feel they understand what that company does just by the name. So
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, yeah. So Deborah's asked, do you have any tips on how to approach a group when you are attending an event on yourself, by yourself? I mean, this happens to everybody, and it can be so intimidating. I mean, we've all been there, we've all done it. Tips to do that. How would I do that? I suppose it depends on the context. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a hard one. Yeah, because
I think
feels a bit awkward.
it does, but in most instances, I think you have to remember that everyone has been where you've been. And if you just step into conversation, there is going to be someone there who is kind and is welcoming and is going to, you know, bring you into the fold. And otherwise, it's probably not going to go anywhere anyway, to some extent. But it really depends on if you're looking to speak with someone specifically in a group, in which you have to find a way that is you know, appropriate and not sort of, you know, elbowing your way in too much, or if you're just at a, you know, at an event, be it for networking or for trade tasting or whatever that may be, in which you find yourself at a bit of a loose end and in a position where you like to join in conversation with your peers. So I think it is that kind of quick analysis of what am I trying to achieve here. And sometimes it goes really badly. And as much as you know, feedback from you know, peers and stuff in terms of your elevator pitch, I think the other feedback is, how did that go? I went to this event, I did not achieve what I was looking to achieve. Here's what I wish I'd done differently. Here's what I'll do next time. I think that kind of reflection we often lose when there is perhaps a slightly more social element to these kind of networking, you know, any networking experiences or any kind of, you know, group meeting with your industry. I think that can be a real problem. So the more honest you can be with the more honest you can be with others, and then the more honest you can be with yourself. That's really powerful.
I think one thing too about like sidling up to a conversation when that feels awkward. Well, if it's in a networking context, people understand that. You know, if you're going to the summit and, you know, there's a clump of people, they know that you're here to meet people in the industry. So I think that in itself is fine for you to go up and tag along to that group. But I think what's really effective is to provide something in the conversation, you know, to contribute somehow, either an insight or a comment at the appropriate time when the conversation allows. You know, just say, hey, you know, it's really interesting that you're talking about whatever, wine taxes in the US. Or like Brexit, I don't know, something, maybe something a little bit more interesting. Or like the growth of rosé in the consumer market. Hey, you know, actually, that reflects something similar that I've seen in my job in the US. Really curious to hear what you guys think. Or, you know, just something. I think like the fact that we are at networking events or proactively trying to meet other people means that we're engaged in our industry. So show some of that enthusiasm and provide some other interesting things for people to build a conversation around, because they will naturally include you as well if you've got something interesting.
And I think it's good to go in with expectations. You know, you shouldn't try to speak to 20 to 30 people. You should really try to make really meaningful connections with just 2 to 3 people. And so that'll, you know, I like what you said, Hannah, about reflecting on how you did. And maybe you were just trying to meet a bunch of different people, but you really want to next time go in with a strategy with your elevator pitch in place and make the right connection. So
yeah,
I think we have a couple more questions here too. Maria is asking, could you provide a few examples of what you feel are good reasons or not good reasons for further follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, a good reason could be something, you know, you were at this event, I was at this event, are you going to this? It would be wonderful if you are. I'd love to have coffee with you when you're there. You know, we all work in very similar industries, so often people are going to the same things. A follow-up I had the other day where this event, I'm sure you're going to this speaking session is on, I can guarantee that you will be there. I'd love to have coffee with you afterwards and catch up and see what you think of the speakers. So that's always a good way of following up with someone. and things that you've thought about within the conversation. So we recently did a talk at London Wine Fair about diversifying thought leadership in the industry. And surprise, surprise, there weren't that many guys in the room. And afterwards, we were reflecting on with the speakers, how can we go about bringing, getting more men to come to these sessions to talk about things like flexible working and that kind of stuff. And this one lady sent me an email and said, I've been thinking about what you were talking about, and I found this article, and I thought it was really on point, and I'd love to share it with you. If you ever, if you want to discuss it further, I'd love to get coffee with you, and here's my mobile number. And that was wonderful, because I remember the conversation, and I read the article, and I thought, yes, I'm totally going to use this. Yeah, so we're going to meet for coffee.
Yeah.
That's very that's really useful.
I think what is a good reason to follow up depends on the conversation and who you're speaking to, of course. If it's someone that you want to work with in the future, part of it is being a good listener and listening to what they're saying as well, so that you can pick up on cues, that you can follow up with after the conversation. Oh, I really thought your comments about millennial wine drinkers is really interesting. I found this article that you might be interested in, or I'm doing a piece of work on it, or, as a marketing manager, that's one major challenge that I have. I'd love to chat to you more, maybe get a coffee and discuss some of the things that, we're both facing. So I think part of it is providing a good hook to follow up with. And that depends on how well you've listened and absorbed what that other person was saying, so that you can make a meaningful connection. Because I'm sure we have a lot of business cards that, you kind of throw on your desk when you get back, and you're like, oh, great, nice to have met that person. I won't ever remember them, because I can't even remember what we talked about. So yeah, it depends on the conversation, the person, what you want to get at.
Yeah. Serena has asked, hi Serena, I know that name. She said, I have a question about business cards. I had an experience handing out a business card where I received a response saying, do people still hand these out? Fair question. And do you have tips for asking for online profile and social media accounts without being awkward? Well, I would say to both those things, yes, of course, business cards are still used. It's a traditional form of carrying around your information, but in every industry, whether that's creative industries, designers have business cards, music managers have business cards, solicitors, lawyers have business cards. I think that I wouldn't necessarily agree with that person. It's obviously a very traditional form of giving out your information. They might prefer to take things offline. It's probably more environmentally friendly not to print business cards nowadays. So you can get email addresses or share phone numbers and that kind of thing. I believe that's the way people are going. But also on the social media stuff, a lot of the time I just say, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, what's your handle? People love to be followed. They love to be liked and followed and have people, looking at what they're saying and what they're doing. So try not to feel awkward about that. I think it's quite a compliment to want to ask those things. If someone says to me, what's your Instagram at? I'll follow you. I'm like, of course.
Yeah. I think but it's also important to know your audience.
Yeah.
Because there will be, if we were to look at it from a generation or someone based on their, their position within a company, and I know this goes without saying, so forgive me, but nonetheless, it wouldn't be appropriate to say, can I have your, Twitter handle to someone who is not on social media. Yeah, exactly. So it's just worth keeping that in mind, that there are, we have to remember, and also not be, sort of offended perhaps if someone younger than us, comes up and says, what's your Instagram? What's your Twitter? Understand that there is a slightly, we're working between a couple of, technical or generational
Yeah.
divides. So keep an open mind about that, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, going back to the business card thing, I think it's actually less intrusive of a way to give your details to someone, which I think it's a little bit nicer because you don't have to interrupt the conversation, shuffle around with your phone, like, start getting your email addresses out and, or whatever, like, or it's a more kind of easy way to just be like, okay, here you go. And then someone can take it and do what they want with it. I remember going to this wine fair and there was this really sweaty, gross guy, and he was like, oh, I'm trying to set up a wine fair in this random place. Like, we really want you to come exhibit. Give me your email address. Let me have your phone so I can give you my email address. It's like, yeah, no, like, I can just take your card and maybe keep it. Yeah. But I do think it is a nice way. It's just easy. It doesn't have to interrupt the conversation, and people can do with it what they want. So I think there's still a use for this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I can just put a plug in for Women in the Wine and Spirits too. If you're at a member event, you can always find them on the directory. So rather than doing that, you can tell them your name. You can go on and find them there, which is important to have your profile picture up there. We talked about LinkedIn. On the Women in the Wine and Spirits directory, there's too many women and men who don't have their photos. So it's kind of hard to, paint a picture and understand who you want to engage with if you don't have that photo up and your details. And on our site, we actually have a space for your headline. So that's where you can put your elevator pitch. So we have a digital elevator pitch on our site.
That's great.
That's a great idea. That's really good. Oh, and challenging as well. What would I put?
Well, I also have to note too, we'll be sharing the slides with all the attendees too, so you can go back and look at some of your points there. And I welcome, the ladies to email us their elevator pitches and just, start a discussion group, maybe even on the Women in the Wine and Spirit website where you practice this, like you did your round robins and your live events. So it'd be really interesting to see how we can help one another focus on your strengths and pull it out.
Definitely. Great.
Great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and if anyone has any other questions, we'll give you our email address and you can always email us. But yeah, for those coming to London, have a great time. Enjoy the city.
Yeah.
Enjoy yourself as well.
You've got
Thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.